2021, the year where GameStop crashed the stock market. There was a vaccine for a deadly disease and a bunch of people just chose not to get it. They played Chrono Trigger music at the Olympics, and rich people made JPEGs that harm the environment. Please keep those far away from video games, because man did some good ones come out last year. But where's the fun in just talking about new games? While I did play more new stuff than I did in 2020, I also played some real bangers that didn't come out in 2021. You probably know how these videos work by now. Here's the games I played in 2021. Most people's New Year's resolutions are something like get in shape, get better at a skill, talk to people for once in your life, stuff like that. My New Year's resolution of 2021 was to play Battle Network 1 and 2. I don't know how I managed to go so long without it. I grew up with Mega Man Battle Network and played them a ton, and yet I hadn't played the first two games until now. Somehow. Battle Network 1 is rough. There's way too much backtracking, the plot only exists to get you to the next dungeon, and it's laughably easy. But it was kinda cool seeing the series in such a raw, unrefined form, even how I'm used to playing 5 and 6 so much. 2 makes up for the first game in spades, though. How did it take me so long to play this? It's insane! Battle Network 2 seems to find a balance between everything good about this series, all while beating you into submission. I wasn't expecting the game to be so hard. Like, wow, is this why Gator exists? So you could just break it in 6? It's so weird to think that this is simultaneously the hardest and easiest game in the series. You build the right deck and you just start almost every fight with an instant win button. My only big issue is how the story isn't as involved as the other games. You can summarize in a paragraph, honestly. Which is probably why I never felt the need to play these growing up. You can skip the first 2 games and everything makes perfect sense afterwards. Part of me is glad I waited this long though. It's almost unbelievable Battle Network 2 came out in 2002. I mean, for God's sake, there's a part where you save a plane from a terrorist attack. It's incredible this wasn't cut out entirely. Or this perfection of NPC dialogue. I'm not going camping, you know. My parents told me to come home. They were totally overreacting to this virus thing. What? But speaking of games I'd been meaning to play, my one friend had practically been holding a gun up to my head telling me to play Crosscode, and I had a Game Pass, so why not? How is this game so good? Okay, so imagine Zelda if it was an action RPG instead of an action-adventure game, and you replace the fantasy with sci-fi. I was starting to miss classic Zelda, and it kind of filled that void for me. It's really fun to explore this world, and it has the same kind of Zelda dungeon structure. Although the game can definitely be too much at times, like, its combat and puzzles are hard. This is not a game you can turn your brain off for. It's almost exhausting at times. That ended up making me remember more of it, weirdly enough. And for a game that goes for 30 hours, that's just about the best thing I can say about it. It never got boring. Even with its admittedly kinda tropey story, it spins stuff in just the right ways to be interesting. This is the only game I can think of where Lee being silent is integral to the plot. The game got DLC this year too, and it goes hard. Giving an extra dungeon and a new final boss that tests all of your abilities so well, it feels like you master the combat when you finally conquer these bastards. Seriously, Crosscode's awesome. Please buy 3 copies of it, more people need to play it. And in case anyone wonders why I don't mention Game Pass again, this is the only new game I played on it this year, because it turns out that I can have a whole library of great games I've never played and not be in the mood to play any of them. Yeah, it really do be like that sometimes. Crosscode's puzzles were definitely hard, but at least they weren't completely brain-melting like Baba's You. It's this insanely clever puzzle game or use words to change the game's rules. Like, Baba might be you right now, but maybe Flag can be you. It's really one of those games you just have to play and question your own intelligence. Seriously, I don't know what casual Einstein came up with this stuff. It's mind-bending even just thinking about some of these puzzles, let alone actually coming up with them in the first place. I really wanted to play this game more, but I can only stare at the screen for 30 minutes with a blank expression on my face for so long. Great game if you're in the mood to feel like you're totally incompetent at breathing. Alternatively, if you want to inflict more emotional pain on yourself, Omori. Let's talk about some new stuff for a change. It technically came out Christmas 2020, but most people I know, including me, didn't hear about it until at least a week later, so it kinda counts as a 2021 game? Let's go by Amoga's rules for this. Anyway, I really liked this one. It's a turn-based RPG with this really clever emotional triangle system, cute characters, great music, and psychological horror that will scar you emotionally. Like seriously, the stuff that happens near the end of the game, and even just periodically, almost feels out of place with how lighthearted it is otherwise. Which I do like. Not everything everything needs to be depressing all the time. This game makes you laugh and question your own mental health. But really, don't play Omori if you're not in a good mental state. This game gets really messed up, which is why I'm showing stock animal footage instead. Seriously, this is the same game with enemy names like Wormhole and a death status called Toast. Homocat, are you okay? Please draw more shitposts of your characters. I could really use a dopamine boost after this. And guess what else gives you massive amounts of dopamine? Persona 5. Strikers. Fooled you for a second, didn't I? When making a Dynasty Warriors spin-off, instead of a crossover or a weird-ass prequel that makes things up as it goes along, Persona 5 Strikers is the canon sequel to Persona 5. Weird metaverse-y stuff starts happening again, so the Phantom Thieves go on a road trip for the summer. The story isn't overly deep or anything, but it's an excuse to see the characters more, and that's good enough for me. It fixes my main issue with 5's cast, actually. They spent so much time being the Phantom Thieves that they didn't really have time to be friends, and they actually make sure everyone gets proper screen time. The gameplay is pretty refreshing too. Instead of the usual Dynasty Warriors formula, the game is basically just Persona as an action RPG. While the structure gets a little formulaic, there's enough gameplay variety sprinkled throughout that it's not a big deal. Especially with that dope-ass music as per usual. Beating up Tony Stark never sounded so good. Like, seriously, there's no way that was intentional. And to think this game is actually a decent length this time. Alright, I'm not talking about Persona next year, I swear. Oh, for funk's sake. On, like, a Friday night funkin'. Imagine DDR but with some dumbass and only says Bopey Bo. And that's all this game is, honestly. A stupid game with stupidly good music and nice art that I can't look at properly because I'm too busy paying attention to the top of the screen. I really like how it's not afraid to randomly switch up art styles either. That was some nice variety. There's a reason why I never streamed or tweeted about this game or anything. I push the arrow keys and they give me the good chemical in my brain. This game got people using Newgrounds in 2021. That's reason enough to talk about it. You know, I haven't really talked about that brand new generation of consoles yet. Mainly because finding them is impossible. I had the free government money for this stupid ass thing for months on end, and I still couldn't get a PS5, even after spending who knows how long waiting in their dumb queue to get into PlayStation Direct. I appreciate them cutting out the retailer middleman, but why can't you just backorder them and they send one when it's your place in line? You may spend months waiting for one, but at least you're not wasting time staring at a waiting screen that just ends up blue balling you anyway. I was waiting to replay Ratchet & Clank on PS5 because of the 60 FPS patch, but I was tired of waiting and just replayed it anyway. And it reminded me that not everything needs to be perfect performance. The 30 FPS was so smooth that it was never an issue. At a time where my PS4 was collecting dust, waiting to be replaced, I really didn't need to do that. It's just as enjoyable to play what I want to now, even if there's an elusive new console that plays it better. I was happy with what I already have. I don't need a PS5 yet. And then I got a PS5 a week later. Was accepting that I probably can't get one all I needed to do? I should have thought of that earlier. But in all seriousness, PlayStation 5 is worth it if you have the money, but until games stop coming out for PS4, it's not worth tracking one down. The only reason why I had the time to get one was because I was a college student with enough leeway to waste an hour here and there on this stupid thing. If I was working full-time like I am now, it would have been impossible. But anyway, who cares about this expensive hunk and chunk? Let's talk about the games I got for this thing in the PlayStation 5 Lightning Round. Astrobot's Playroom, a tech demo that's somehow the best PS5 exclusive so far. I'm not kidding. There was all this heart and love poured into the history of PlayStation that's just like, man, video games are good. It's all computer themed too, which made the computer nerd in me fanboy multiple times. It really makes you appreciate all this stuff in DualSense, like adaptive triggers that I turn off in every other game because it ends up hurting my hands. Like, why the hell would you make the triggers harder to pull in a game where it is vital to gameplay? I can't play any shooter on this thing for more than 5 minutes without turning it off. Astrobot seems to be the only game so far where the controller gimmicks are consistently well used. I'm not sure if that's sad or brilliant. Demon Souls. I am bad at video games, especially video games that don't control well because it makes me not wanting to get better at it and I just get bored. You know, I'm starting to think that Bloodborne is the only Dark Souls game that I do like. Ratchet & Clank ripped a fart. How do we take advantage of the almost instant load times? Dimensional rifts. You know what, let's make it 1440p 60 FPS with ray tracing just to flex on every other PS5 dev. Like seriously, this might just be the best looking game ever right now. This is literally a Pixar movie in real time. It's incredible. They did a lot to speed up the gameplay too. I love this dash a little too much. Resident Evil Village. Wait, is this game supposed to be scary? It could just be me, but when Ethan's wife had that mommy haircut and died 10 minutes later, I couldn't stop laughing for 5 minutes. Or like Vampire Lady cuts off his hand and he just ties it back on with bandages. That's not how limbs work, Ethan. I don't know, I think Chris is a werewolf or something, I didn't get that far. Sackboy, A Big Adventure. When I saw Little Big Planet was abandoning the level creation, making something similar to 3D World instead, I really didn't know how to feel about it. Yeah, Dreams is a thing now, but taking out the main point of Little Big Planet just felt wrong. But then he played and it's like, okay, never mind, this is a pretty good video game, I forgive you. Like, seriously, there's nothing wrong with these third-person story-driven cinematic games that Sony keeps releasing, but I have way more fun with the ones that aren't like that, and this game just further cements it. Sackboy is a pretty decent game on its own, but it has so much charm that he kinda can't help but have a good time. Especially with the friends that I definitely have, but absolutely do not own this game. Guess I'll just dab away the pain in a Fortnite skin. I take it back, this game was a mistake. Out of the games I played when I first got my PS5, the only one I really have a decent amount to say about is Nier Replicant, because I have really mixed feelings about it. It does so much cool stuff with the story and gameplay, like how unique and likable all the major characters are, or how there's one area with a Resident Evil camera and one with an isometric view just to give some visual variety. But for all the cool stuff, there's something else that just doesn't jive with me. Like how the late game story makes zero sense solely because they don't bother to explain anything, or how there's no fast travel for most of the game. But the worst part is how in order to get the true ending, you have to play through the last third of the game like 2 more times. It's a section of the game that's fine on its own, but I had to play it so much that I want nothing to do with it now. It's almost like the game conditions you to never want to touch it again. But hey, I'm the weirdo who played Replicant before Automata. The original game was already this hack-and-slashy action RPG, so naturally, Platinum Games' perfected hack-and-slash formula combined with Yoko Taro's unique brand of bullshit seemed like a match made in heaven. And it kinda was. Instead of playing through the last part of the game multiple times, you just play the much shorter game again from literally a new perspective with a different gameplay style. Hacking was a footnote in 2B's playthrough, but it is integral to 9S's. I haven't finished Automata fully yet, but 2B's ass made this game sell 6 million copies, a sequel was inevitable, and I am now fully on board with Yoko Taro's wild ride. But how about Outer Wilds? Okay, actually, maybe I shouldn't show footage of this game, because imagine a Metroidvania where instead of gaining new abilities, you gain new knowledge. And if you go in with this knowledge already in your possession, you can just do it. Like, if you already know how to, you can beat this game in 30 minutes. I don't want to spoil anything, because it's one of few games you can only truly play once. But getting to that point is so addicting. It's so easy to get engrossed in exploring the solar system that explodes every 20 minutes because of weird time loop shenanigans. I want to go everywhere, do everything, learn all that I can, and uncover all the mysteries of the universe. And it's a game where you get an achievement for killing yourself within the first 60 seconds. I guess I have to put something relevant on screen again. Yeah, sure, let's talk about that. So despite previously being like, I do not like Final Fantasy, I've decided to try another Final Fantasy. Yeah, that one. And honestly, I really liked it. Not sure why I seem to vibe with 9 more than the others, but whatever. It's good. Really need to finish it at some point, though. I only got like a third of the way through it, I think. You know, I should clarify, I don't talk about every game throughout the year in these videos, mainly because saying I played Nocturne HD for an hour to get footage for a stupid joke is not very interesting. But it felt weird not mentioning Final Fantasy IX, despite having next to nothing to say about it, apparently. I have plenty to say about the next few games, though, because boy howdy, why is no one talking about Scarlet Nexus? It was a game I only vaguely remember hearing about. It was that one game from Microsoft's E3 conference that one year that kinda looked like Astral Chain. I paid no attention to it until there was a demo and thought, I just got a PS5, might as well. It took some getting used to, but once I did, the game really popped off. Funny that everyone thought it looked like Astral Chain because it takes a lot of inspiration from Platinum Games, and it feels like one. Imagine if you were playing a fusion between Bayonetta and Silver the Hedgehog, but good. That's kind of what this game is, and it's amazing. The game definitely starts slow, but this is one of few games I've played where it just keeps getting better. By the end, you have so many abilities at your disposal, you feel like a goddamn superhero, and the game is really good at making you use those abilities. You clear out enemies so much more efficiently, and ends on such a high note gameplay-wise too. The final level is honestly one of my favorite final levels ever. They make you feel like such a badass, and it's wrapped up in a story that I really liked. There's so many twists and turns that I was almost always interested in where it was going next. My only issue is how it gets a little convoluted near the end, which is weird because it's pretty straightforward otherwise. And also, it's probably the best use of dual protagonists I've ever seen. You get the whole whole story no matter who you play as, but certain details are elaborate and on better depending on who you're playing as. You get different plot points revealed at different points too. Like if you're playing Yuito's story first, you're wondering why Kasane wants you dead so badly, but it's totally obvious you're playing as her first. I love Scarlet Nexus so much that it was definitely my game of the year, and this is coming from the same year with the new Metroid. I was so blindsided by this game, which might have made me like it more than I would have otherwise. Seriously, Scarlet Nexus is just really good. Please play it. And to think another banger came out so soon after. No one was expecting a second World Ends With You after all this time, but Nioh was so great. They obviously had to change up the combat to make it work with the controller, but what they came up with was a pretty decent compromise. It still plays weird with each button representing a different move they can use, but it's weird in a way that can be easily ported, and God knows this game needs it. Yeah, it's not a Switch exclusive, it's also on PS4. Trust me, I'm the only one who bought that version. Nioh The World Ends With You feels like this modern continuation of the first, with all the same writing and charm of the original. The story isn't quite as good as last time, but it was so much fun going through this game that I blasted through it in like a week. I was hooked, I needed my closure, man. Yet another game more people need to play. Seriously, Square Enix acted like this game didn't exist. Why? You already made the game, maybe more people would be interested if you actually advertised the damn thing, and didn't make the PC version an Epic exclusive. Did you want this game to fail? I would tell all my friends to buy this game, but most of them already did. I'm actually tempted to buy the other versions because it's really good and it doesn't deserve these terrible sales. It's starting to look like a game that gets discovered 5 or 10 years from now with some YouTuber gushing about it for an hour, and at the rate I'm going, it might be me. Seriously, I may be a newer fan of the series, but it's still pretty surreal Nioh The World Ends With You exists at all. And it's even more surreal that we got a sequel to Psychonauts in the same year. Every time the Psychonauts 2 was mentioned, it was hard to visualize it even being real. Like, are you sure this game is being made? Because I don't necessarily believe you. Psychonauts was a really good game, but it had too many quirks to keep it from being truly great in my eyes. But then Psychonauts 2 comes in and amps up the entire idea to 11. It almost feels like each level comes from a completely different game. You'll be going through a crazy office-turned dental monstrosity one level, maybe a casino the next, and show up to a playable Beatles album later. Or what if we just made a whole level made of hair? It's crazy how much variety there is this time, and it's all great. There wasn't a single point in this game that felt gimmicky or tacked on. The game's controls are way better too. The first game felt really loose as a platformer, but it actually feels good to play now. And all this good writing and story is just a cherry on top. This was a great time. If Double Fine can do this good by the proper time and budget, just give Tim Schafer a blank check outright next time. This dude's something else. Just like Xenosaga. I got tired of waiting around for Xenoblade 3 to be announced, so I thought, why not play one of the older Xeno games? The saga seemed to be more relevant given that Monolith is actually allowed to use the IP, so why not start there? The gameplay is a fairly bog standard RPG where you run down hallways, but given the story, I didn't mind that too much. So, what do you do when the universe is getting overrun with space zombies that don't even exist in the same reality as us? You accidentally go on a spacefaring adventure with your Gnosis killing machine you helped make, obviously. And it's a good thing I found myself really into the story because there's a lot of it, like, a lot of it. These are really good cutscenes, don't get me wrong, but maybe it could have toned it down a bit. I swear, a third of this 30-hour game is just watching cutscenes, man. It's insane they're able to do that on PS2, but damn, guys, could you at least put some music in the overworld? It's the most bizarre thing. The same developers that later gave us the soundtracks to Xenoblade just chose to have one battle theme and only rarely play music outside of a battle. It makes wandering around feel so empty. Xenosaga Episode 1 is such a weird game for me. I ended up really liking it, but it's hard to recommend it because you need a really specific taste to enjoy it. But hey, if you want a sci-fi epic with a turn-based RPG on the side, go for it. I'll get around to playing 2 and 3 eventually. This is just the kind of game you gotta commit yourself to. But committing something isn't always a good thing. Just don't be like Turnip Boy and commit tax evasion. You would think this game would be a shitpost, and it honestly is. It's a 2-hour-long joke, and it's wonderful. You are a turnip boy that has to go around paying for his tax evasion committing crimes, tearing up every document you find along the way. And it knows it's just a giant joke. This story feels made up as they went along, involving existential dread, the mafia, and even nuclear war. Somehow. This is one of those games that's just so stupid and cute, you can't help but love it. There's a literal piece of pasta reciting a G-rated version of Navy SEALs. If that doesn't convince you to try it out, I don't know what will. Speaking of indie games, there's a few other good ones I played around this time, like Axiom Verge 2. The first game was a really good Metroidvania, and the sequel is even better. Everything's been expanded upon from the first game while still being totally different, like the bigger emphasis on melee combat. And I love what they did with the drone, with how it's practically a second character now, even going so far as to make a second dimension that you can only access with the drone. My only big issue with it is the story. Not that there's anything wrong with what's here, it's just that the first game ended on a cliffhanger, and then Axiom Verge 2 doesn't address that at all. It's completely separated from the first game. Normally I wouldn't care too much, but when these games only come out every 5 or 6 years, that's annoying. Intra-story is all well and good, but I still want to know what happened to Trace, and it ends on another cliffhanger, and it's like, this story won't ever get closure, will it? But what probably will get closure is Deltarune. I played the first episode, or chapter, when it first came out in 2018 and had a blast, and episode 2 was even better. It takes everything from before and just continues it. Now, that may be a little jarring if you only play the first chapter as soon as it came out and then never again, but it was only 3 hours, not like the game was long. And chapter 2 was pretty meaty, too. I finished in 6 hours, and that was plenty of time for wacky set pieces and that Toby Fox sense of humor. First chapter felt like a demo because it was, but chapter 2 feels like a legit game this time. And it may have taken 3 years to make, but given how there's not a moment of downtime or filler, that's impressive. So far, Deltarune is one of few games that constantly kept my attention. That's difficult to do for any game, let alone one that's 9 hours so far. And the first 2 chapters are free. Everything from now on will be paid, but if an incredible 9-hour demo doesn't convince you to pre-order the full game when it does get made, you might have trust issues to iron out. It's a game that respects your time, and I'm patiently waiting for more. However, if you want a game that doesn't respect your time, look no further than Digimon Cyber Sleuth, because I like Digimon and actually had a good time with it. Micromanaging a bunch of Digimon to see what they can evolve into was really addicting, and I like the battle system. It's like a simpler version of SMT. I was having a lot of fun for the first 35-ish hours, but once I got to the 40-hour mark, I was really starting to wonder when this damn thing was ending, and then it went on for another 15 hours. This game is way too long. So little happens for it to drag on this much. And it's not even like there's a decent story or anything, because there isn't. It's generic anime garbage most of the time, and it doesn't even get kind of interesting until 20 hours in. And even then, the characters are so generic and bland that I just don't care. And you can't even skip cutscenes in 2016. How? The difficulty is whack too. Your options are so easy, you can play the game with your eyes closed, or usually pretty easy, but then randomly gets impossible for no reason every now and then. You can change the difficulty at any time, but it feels like a band-aid to make the game more bearable. There is a good game in here, it just gets bogged down by a generic story and goes on for way longer than it should have. I hope Digimon Survive is better, because I'm debating even playing Hacker's Story to be honest. Cyber Sleuth is just too much of a slog. Metroid Dread was the opposite of a slog. It was the most based game I've played in a while, and I loved every millisecond of it. Yeah, shocking coming from me. Samus Returns was a flawed Metroid game, but Dread is like the epitome, arguably the best game in the same series that has Super Metroid. I love all the new abilities too. They gave Samus a dash. Bruh. Can we get Mercury Steam to work on this series semi-permanently? This was the first time I had a brand new Metroid game to play, and I played it twice in a week. It's so damn good, man. I almost feel bad for Retro right now. They have to follow up this game. That's not easy. Dread pushed the series forward so much that I actually wouldn't mind a Super Metroid remake that plays like this. I just love this game, man. And I'd say more, but in all honesty, I'm probably reviewing it this year at some point. Just make sure to buy a copy in the meantime to absolutely 100% guarantee it becomes the best-selling game in the series, if it wasn't already. God, Dread was satisfying. It really put me in the mood for more Metroidvania, so why not RDO-Star? I really liked it, but I don't know, it just didn't do anything for me. I was really in the mood for a good RPG come November, and wouldn't you know it, a remake to one of my favorite games of all time was coming out. So, naturally, I played Shin Megami Tensei 5 instead. I've never played a game where it was so fun to get my ass kicked. It's hard, but I was rarely frustrated. Instead of having a grind, you reassess your strategy, fuse better demons, and just figure out how to kill this asshole in particular. Having to actually think about what I'm doing is so much more interesting than just spamming your best attack constantly. And it's really awesome how fast the battles are. Animations are quick but still flashy, menus are organized well, there's hotkeys for important actions like passing, and you can just press the A button to skip the animation outright. It's not nearly as linear as I expected it to be either. The areas are usually big and open, you're constantly rewarded for looking through every nook and cranny. It was really reminding me of Xenoblade. There's a lot of modern conveniences in general, which makes the exploration that much smoother. I didn't think I needed the ability to just warp to the last used save point so badly. It's literally game-changing. And good lord, the god-tier music just makes this game way better. Almost every song in this game goes as hard as the difficulty. My only issue with it is that the story just kinda exists, but it's oddly refreshing. So many long RPGs have a big, grand story, but SMT is mostly gameplay. There's nothing to keep track of, just jump back in when you feel like it. You can skip cutscenes, but it takes up so little of your time that it wouldn't have hurt the game if you couldn't. And that's good, because this is pretty much the only game I played for like a month, and I didn't mind. It's just that awesome. An absolute giga chat of a video game. Well, there wasn't much else I played this year, so it's time for the games I got around Christmas. Actually, I'd mainly just play a little bit of Devil May Cry and Super Monkey Ball. I really like Devil May Cry, but I'm planning on finally playing through all of these games, so maybe I should save it for next year. And for Super Monkey Ball Banana Mania, whoever decided that the original games need lives should be fired. And now, a moment of silence for the games I wanted to play, but didn't, for one reason or another. Tales of Arise, Halo Infinite, Mass Effect Legendary Edition, Deathloop, New Pokemon Snap, Honey Pop 2. 2021 though, there was a reason I played this many video games. I didn't expect this thing to go on for 9 pages, but here we are. Seriously, I actually had to cut out a few games. I'm probably going lighter on the editing too, just to release this thing while it's actually relevant. Hopefully it didn't sound too rambly. There were just so many great times I had last year, and talking about almost all of them went on longer than I expected. The year itself though, it was honestly more 2020, just terrible all around in the grand scheme of things. I don't know if I've just gotten used to this whole pandemic thing or what, but it was easier for me at least. Graduated college, moved twice, somehow got a decent job. Things could have been worse. Really though, can this thing just be over with? I'd like to be able to go outside without fear, thanks. But hey, at least in video games, 2022 is looking stacked. And that's sure as hell something to look forward to. Regardless of the potentially bleak real-world future, take care everyone.
See you next mission.